Hi boys and girls. Hi blah 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 blah. Hi boys and ghouls. So today we're going to be filming our top 10 horror films of 2018. And I know it's almost February, but better late than never, right?
Yeah. And honestly, we're setting ourselves apart because we're gonna be doing it later than everybody else, and we took time to consider our options and sneak in a couple of movies that we wanted to see, even though there's still definitely a lot that I missed that I wish I could have seen before making this list, but it did make it easier to narrow it down. So we'll eventually catch up with some of the ones we haven't seen yet, but for right now, we got a good little list made for each of us.
So both of our lists are written down, so if we're like looking down or I'm looking at my phone, it's just because we're looking at our list. So we're gonna start from 10 being like the lowest on our favorite list, if that makes sense, and then 1 being the highest, but we're gonna start with 10 and then we're gonna end with our honorable mentions because there were just so many good horror films of 2018. I mean, it was insane, huh?
Yeah, I would say that this was definitely one of the better years we've had in a long time. And I know that's a sentiment that a lot of people are echoing. We both listen to this horror movie podcast called Horror Movie Podcast. And they were kind of talking about how they see this as kind of a golden age of horror right now that we're living in. This year specifically, but also 2017 had some really good stuff, and I'm assuming that 2019 is going to be no different. So right now I think that we're probably in one of the best eras for horror that we've had in a long time, so it's really exciting to be able to go and see these movies and have stuff to talk about. So yeah.
If you guys want to check out that podcast, it's literally just Horror Movie Podcast on Apple Podcasts, and yeah.
And they have a website too. It's just, again, Horror Movie Podcast.
I'll link it down below.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm gonna go ahead and start. So my number 10 for the top horror movies of 2018 is, or I guess was, Hellfest. So Hellfest made my list. There's kind of a lot of mixed reviews on it out there because some people were like, it was bad, it was not a good horror movie, and some people were like, it was so much fun to watch, it was great. I loved it. Personally, what gravitated me towards that film the most is just the concept. I love the concept of like a Halloween Horror Nights themed park, or themed night with the serial killer on the loose. I thought it was so much fun to watch. I really enjoyed it. We saw it about a month before we went to Horror Nights, and so it got me really pumped and also like traumatized me. But all in all, I honestly thought it was such a fun watch. It's definitely not the best, again, in terms of horror movies, and the serial killer, the serial killer in the movie wasn't like the greatest. But all in all, I thought it was a really fun watch. We will buy it when it goes on sale, and I think that's all I have to say about that. I know that it's not currently streaming on anything, but you can rent it or maybe Redbox it, and it just came out on DVD.
Yeah, you can Redbox it for sure.
And it just came out on DVD, so I definitely 100% recommend checking it out. It's a horror movie that I personally think I will want to watch, every year around Halloween time because it's so much fun. Your number 10.
3, 2, 1. My number 10. My number 10 is Strangers Prey at Night. Strangers Prey at Night, I actually saw... Wait, we watched Strangers before we went to see Strangers Prey at Night, didn't we?
So,
okay, hold on.
The Strangers is one of my favorite movies ever, and he never watched it. So we watched it, and then like a week after, I took him to go see Strangers Prey at Night, which I had already seen in theaters before him, but we went together.
Okay.
And it was your first time.
I couldn't remember the order. Regardless, Strangers is phenomenal. I'm a big fan of it. The reason it took me so long to see it is because when it came out, my brother saw it and he didn't like it, and at the time I was very much like in tune with his suggestions, so I just never got around to it. However, now that I've seen it, I definitely realized that I was like missing out on something that I would have enjoyed a lot. So anyway, with that part being said, we saw Strangers Prey at Night, and I really liked it. And basically the idea of taking that whole like home invasion story and then moving it to a trailer park or kind of like trailer resort.
Like a townhome situation.
Yeah, it's like a little camping getaway place, but it's a lot of trailers and stuff. Taking that story and kind of opening it up a bit and making this one a little more, I would say, like action-y than the first one was. Just kind of added a new little flair to it. I thought it was an interesting take on the movie, and I like a lot of like the 80s influence that came through, and it had a phenomenal soundtrack and some incredible scenes. If you've listened to anybody's top 10 horror movies, every single person has probably mentioned that the pool scene is like one of the top scenes of the year. I probably agree with that. That scene is pretty incredible, and like it's just so well done. So that's my top 10, or not.
Number 10.
That's my number 10.
So my number 9 was The Ritual. It's currently streaming on Netflix. And we didn't say that either, but
Strangers is just to rent.
Yeah, just rent or buy. It's not streaming currently.
I mean, you could probably stream it on Amazon, but you'd have to rent it on Amazon. But just rent it.
Anyways, my number 9 is The Ritual, which is currently streaming on Netflix. It's based on a book, I believe.
Which I didn't know.
And that movie, let me tell you something. We watched that movie on like a really gloomy, overcast day, which was perfect. So this movie kind of takes place with these guys. After a devastation, they decide to go take a hiking trip, and shit just gets buck wild from there. I'm not gonna say much because I don't want to spoil it.
Yeah, I wouldn't say any more than that.
If you like horror or you're in need of something good to watch on Netflix, you need something, watch The Ritual. It was incredible. Super culty meets like a beast. What do you call it? Like a creature?
Yeah, it's a creature feature.
A creature feature meets a culty. I don't know. I love it. Everything about it was super intriguing, cool. I wouldn't say that's a slow burn necessarily. It kind of like hits you in different places in the film. But yeah, it was my number 9, and I digged it. It was a good watch, and we probably are gonna buy it. So
if they ever release it, because it is a Netflix movie.
Oh, excuse me.
My number 9 is The First Purge, and anybody that's rolling their eyes right now, roll them away. I do not care. I have been a fan of The Purge from the first movie all the way up to this movie, and I thought each and every one of them has had something to offer and is a good movie. I think they've obviously moved a little further away from like straight up horror, but it's like a horror action flick, and I don't think that that's an issue. You don't see many horror action flicks anymore, or at all in general. I would say like this and Overlord and some things like that are probably some of the few. But I think The Purge is just something that's very clever, and the way that they've set it up to where you go from the first movie that takes place in one house, to the second movie that takes place in the city, to a third movie which has the whole world implicated in it, and then let's go back and see how this whole thing started. Like, they're very intentional with the way they set these movies up, and I am a big fan of seeing what they're gonna do each time. Because the thing is, it's The Purge. People are gonna go out and kill each other. Okay, how can we make that different each year? What can we do? The second one's my favorite, like, out of all of them, but this one has to probably get a close, like, second to that, because this one did a lot of things that I thought was pretty incredible. It was kind of heavy-handed in its, like, social commentary, but I don't think that's a bad thing, especially at this, point in time with everything that's going on. If you got something to say and it's gonna come out pretty blunt, then say it, like, who cares? So I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed the way that the story plays out, because it doesn't actually happen the way you expect it to necessarily. And I don't want to ruin anything because there are twists and turns to this movie. But basically what I'll say is that the stuff that you like about The Purge, the masks, the craziness, the intensity of like what it's like to be in that environment while this like lawless event is taking place, all of that comes through really well. The characters are good and likable. The like main bad guy, which is like that psycho dude, he's so over the top, but I like that aspect. I don't know, I just got like a lot of good like 80s action horror vibes from it. Plenty of good scenes. Number 9 pick. I enjoyed it. I will own it. We already have the other 3. That's what I have to say.
Netflix, still I believe, and this movie. Okay, so we started it, and I was like, okay, yeah, it's good, and quickly I was like, this movie's amazing. It's about this dad who makes a deal with.
She's like a witch.
She's like a witch, yeah, the witch basically.
Yeah.
Essentially, he makes a deal with a witch, and he gets really ill, and his family's involved, and just a bunch of stuff gets really crazy from there. Super, would you say like satanic?
Yeah, it's like a like possession.
Sorry, I always say satanic,
and
but like possession, and those are like some
gory.
those are some of my favorite films. And just like everything that happens, there was moments where I even was like, I got a little scared, which doesn't happen too often with me. Just the way it was shot, everything. It was incredible. If you have time on your hands, I'd really sit down and watch it. You do have to pay attention, obviously, because one, there's subtitles, but two, like you just have to like really be anchored in to watch it. But yes, that was my number 8. Was that a Netflix original?
Yeah. My number 8 is Malevolent. Malevolent is another, what do you call it, Netflix movie.
Of course.
And it is a, I don't even know how to describe it really. Like, I'll say possession.
Meets torture?
Like, yeah. Like, I don't know. I don't want to give anything away. This honestly is a movie best gone into, like, blind. But the point is this movie does things that I haven't seen many other movies do. It has twists you don't expect and is extremely violent at some parts.
Super underrated.
And yeah, very underrated. I mean, I think like a few people have mentioned it and said it was good and stuff, but like I had a really good appreciation for it, and I definitely encourage people to check it out. Like I said, go into it kind of blind, because it's more fun that way. But it gets intense, and I just really enjoyed it. It's a bummer that we won't be able to own it, but on Netflix.
Alright, my number 7, I'm like so excited to talk about. It's streaming on Netflix, is Apostle. Is that a Netflix original?
Yes.
Yes? But it's streaming on Netflix. Obviously, we don't know if it's a Netflix original or not, kind of. We're like, you know, whatever. But Apostle was my movie. It's my movie. And I'm gonna tell you why. And, you know, you may not agree with me, but, like, these are my vibes. This is what I kind of got from it. I got, like, the witch, but some of, like, the creatures or things in that movie reminded me of Silent Hill, which is, like, one of my favorite horror movies ever, meets The Descent. And it was incredible. I had my attention the whole time. Again, like, it had the witch vibe, and that's, like, my favorite kind of genre of horror. And I loved it. I would have put it higher on my list, but again, there's so many good horror movies out this year. The gore, the story, the ending was incredible. Everything about this film had my heart. It probably is a Netflix original, because Netflix be doing the damn thing, but if it wasn't, I would own it. I loved it so much. It was, how many times am I going to say incredible?
It was incredible.
It was incredible. It was great. Streaming on Netflix. And
Hey, so my number 7, it's Apostle.
it's awesome. That movie was lit, so we can talk about it together. That's tight.
Yeah, so honestly, everything she says stands with me. Her pick of 3 movies that it reminded her of are actually oddly accurate, in a weird kind of way.
Yeah,
I think it was a pretty interesting way to describe it, but I do agree. But yeah, I really was surprised by the movie. When it first started, I was like, okay, interesting. And then as it kept going, it was just like, this is getting better and better and better and better and better and better. The main character starts out kind of weak for me, but then he gets much better as the movie goes on. So that was just my experience. But then everybody else in that movie, especially when it comes to like the village people, not the band or group, but the people that live in the village in which he goes into, are all really well done. And the places that the movie ends up going are like really insane and pretty incredible. I like a movie that just gets really buck wild, and this one does just that.
The torture and the gore in this film.
They're
so
intense.
good.
They're
So
intense,
good.
but I also like, I have to say that it's done in a really like artistic and tasteful kind of way.
And the way it was shot too.
Whereas some other movies that we'll talk about maybe not as much. But yeah, Apostle was really incredible. Like she said a million times. Number 7 for me.
So my number 6 is Halloween. Sorry. So yeah, my number 6 is Halloween. We saw that in theaters. Obviously, like, we go and see almost every horror movie we can in theaters, but this one we were like, duh, we have to.
Yeah.
Super amazing. I loved it. You know, you hear mixed reviews. Everything is kind of, you know, whatever. But I love this movie, and I was kind of telling him it would land in an honorable mention spot. But any movies that correlate with, well, one, I just love the Halloween series in general, but any movie that kind of correlates with the Halloween vibe, or it's on Halloween, or like stuff like that, kind of like Hellfest 2, like just like has my heart and just makes me feel some type of way. So it had to make my list. It's number 6. If you haven't seen it already, which I'm sure you have, you should, especially if you appreciate the Halloween movies. Jamie Lee Curtis is the bomb.com in it. Great kills, good fun, Halloween vibes all the way. I mean, there's
What
not
else
really
can you
much
say?
more to
It's Halloween.
Alright.
Alright. So my number 6, and this is gonna be so low, I understand, hate me all you want, I don't care. Number 6 is A Quiet Place. Everybody has this up in their top 3. It's not my top 3, but this movie is phenomenal. I could not get it out of my head after I saw it, and the tension that I felt during that movie in the theater is unlike anything else I've experienced this year in terms of that kind of feeling. Like we said, we saw a bunch of movies in theaters when it came to horror, but nothing matched the tension I felt in that movie. Like, that movie felt like you had to sit still and be quiet the entire time, and that's what I loved about it. It starts off intense. It keeps that up for the whole movie. You never feel safe. The creatures are awesome. The characters are great. The story is great. The writing, even though there's so little talking, but the writing of that movie is done so well. They set up a story that's just convincing and heartfelt, and I can't say enough good things about it. It's shot amazing. John Krasinski is a boss for directing and writing and acting and everything in this movie. Like, it's phenomenal. You've probably seen it. It was one of the biggest movies last year. But at the end of the day, there's other movies that top it out for me, so I had to put it at number 6. But again, I just say this with like a lot of love. I do love that movie. It just had to be down lower on my personal list.
And it's not currently streaming on anything. So my number 5 was Terrifier, and I'm pretty sure that one's a Netflix original as well. Rolls my eyes in the back of my head. Listen, clown movies. Listen, okay, if I'm going to a haunted house or like a haunted attraction, clowns are the last thing I want to see because they terrify me, they scare me. It's like one of the things where when I see it, I'm like, holy shit, get away from me. But, however, and strangely enough, clown films, clown horror are like some of my favorites.
Clown horror.
Clown
Yeah.
horror are some of my favorites. I loved this movie so much. It really took it there for me. It was super fun. Again, it was on Halloween night, I think is when it happened, or roughly around. And so again, has my heart.
Yeah, it was Halloween night.
So good. again, like, have a little count how many times I said so good. A lot of people actually have already seen it, and there was kind of a hype about it there for a minute, but if you haven't seen Terrifier, it's on Netflix. Go watch it. There's still like one scene from that movie that gives me, I think about constantly, and it like gives me chills. But I loved the violence. I loved how, you know, he was lurking everywhere. You didn't know where he was going to come out from. I wasn't a big fan of the ending, but all in all, like, I would definitely own it if it came out. I loved it. So yeah, that was
my number 5 is The Endless. Number like 5 through 1 is where I have a hard time like just putting them in order. But The Endless is like, I don't want to say a sequel because it's not necessarily, but it's like a expansion of the universe that Resolution, a movie from like 2014, I want to say. I'll have to look that up, but I don't remember. But it's a continuation of that universe, and it is really, really good. I am a big fan of the unknown aspect of horror, so things that can't be understood, and like people consider that Lovecraftian. I just don't know that I necessarily love that term, but I guess like Lovecraftian horror is something that I'm really gravitated towards. I like the idea of gods and like unseen forces and things that you can't understand that control aspects of what is going on. And so The Endless just has a great pacing to it. It doesn't give you too much at one time, but it does a lot of little things to make you wonder. And then as you start getting closer to the end, that's when things get crazy. And as I've already mentioned, when things get buck wild at the ending of a movie, that's when I'm really happy with it. So I don't want to spoil too much of it. It's best again to go into this one with not a lot of back story on it. You don't have to see Resolution to see this, but I would recommend seeing it at some point because it is also a good movie. But yeah, basically number 5, without saying too much more about it, The Endless. Go see it. It's on Netflix. And I think there's another streaming service that's running it, but I just don't know. We saw it on Netflix, so.
I'm so excited to talk about my number 4. So my number 4 was a film called Revenge.
Yeah.
It's streaming on Shudder. However, if you don't have Shudder, which is a horror movie subscription, kind of like a Netflix, but it's horror movies.
It's so good.
I 100% recommend you go rent it at least, or stream it, whatever you have to do. I love a good revenge film. I love a good, how do I say this? A good women empowerment revenge film. It had gore that like I loved. It had a strong storyline which I loved. The whole movie was honestly so well written and done in a way. It was emotional at some points, but also the thing that stuck out the most for me was the ending. That ending scene was probably top 2 of like my favorite horror movie scene of, I want to say all time. The way it was shot and written was incredible. So much blood. Wasn't it directed by a female too, or what was the story behind that? I don't remember the full.
Yeah, she's a woman director. I don't know.
Because didn't she write this movie for something that wasn't there?
Yeah, I'm trying to remember. Which part were you trying to mention? Like, the
reason she wrote the movie.
Oh, it's like her like kind of
take on the male.
Yeah, it's like her
homage.
Her fight against like the male gaze and like male. What do you call it?
So the director is Coralie Fargeet. and it's kind of her take or her homage to like the male gaze, and it's like again super women empowerment.
Not
And-
homage. That's the wrong word. Homage is like to or something. It's
Oh.
her like
Her take, or-
yeah.
Whatever, you guys get what we're trying to say. Sorry, I had a moment, but the movie is amazing again, and seen as one of my favorite horror movie scenes of all time. That movie shook me.
Kicks
That
ass.
movie had me intrigued the whole time. You don't know what's gonna happen. You're kind of like on the edge of your seat, like the whole time, and you really hate the three male characters. Well, I'd say you hate like two of them. Really, you hate all of them.
You hate
but-
all of them.
but you just really hate them. And at first, you kind of don't know whether you like her too much. You kind of just think it's weird. But anyway, I'm not gonna say too much more. Streaming on Shudder. If you don't have Shudder, I would go do it anyway and
It's
watch it.
$5.
It's an incredible film, and you should support it because I think it's well worth it.
yeah.
So
And it's on many people's top 10 lists, so that just also tells you what you need to know if you're skeptical. So my number 4 is a movie called Annihilation. First thing I want to say about this movie is this is a movie with two huge actors, Oscar Isaac and Natalie Portman. The reason that's wild to me is this movie, again, is kind of a type of Lovecraftian horror. So it's a type of like subgenre of horror that honestly doesn't get like a big budget release or viewing even. But this was like a big theater release and all this other stuff, so I was quite surprised by it. But Annihilation is like a sci-fi horror, but with like a Lovecraftian style to it. And again, a lot of these movies I think are best seen without much knowledge of them in terms of what they're about. But this movie has some really cool creature designs. They're a heavy focus in the movie. And the performances from all the characters involved is also top notch. Something that stands out is that it's overall a female dominated cast of various ethnicities. So that's a really interesting aspect of it too. And again, like when it comes to the horror aspects of this movie, it gets intense. When it's not horror related, it's like a beautiful film. Like the thing is they just found a way to create this world that is unlike anything you've really seen. You can make some parallels to other like types of world building that have happened in movies before, but this one just really has its own aesthetic to it. There is a scene with a bear that is definitely one of my top favorite scenes of the year. I think that one was it was pretty insane. So I loved that. Yeah, again, I don't want to say too much about it. It's just one of those movies that you need to see without much backstory on it. I think Netflix or Shudder.
it was actually on Amazon.
Was it? Maybe it was Amazon.
That one was on
Okay.
Amazon.
Amazon Prime for free. You can watch it, or like we said, for everything else, go rent, buy, whatever. I'm gonna buy it.
Alright, so my number 3 was one that you already mentioned, and that was A Quiet Place. I'm not going to talk too much about it because, again, you guys have probably seen it, and if not, obviously he just talked about it, but that movie couldn't go below a 3 for me personally because it was so amazing. We're definitely going to buy it. We usually don't buy like new release horror films. We wait for them to go on sale or until we can find them at like a Second and Charles. Excuse me. But yeah, again, the whole time in the theater, I was like on the edge of my seat. Loved it from beginning to end. Every little aspect of that film was amazing. Something that I appreciate a lot about it is I've never seen a movie like that ever. And so any kind of horror film, you know, that kind of has something very, very unique in terms of the storyline to bring to the table, I always appreciate. But yeah, I've never seen a horror movie like that, and I think it's definitely one of the best films of last year that came out horror-wise. So that's my number 3.
Yep, and you know I agree. My number 3 is Hereditary. So this movie, again, got a ton of buzz behind it. It's one of my absolute favorite movies of the year, horror or otherwise, I don't care. It was one of those things that I don't personally think trailers are ever a good idea. They spoil too much of the movie to me. This one didn't. And I appreciate what the trailer did for this movie because it redirected you entirely. That's all I'm gonna say. Now, the other part I'm gonna say is that this movie is very much performance driven. So the thing that makes it as good as it is the fact that every actor in this movie, like, just kills their role. They all put forward the type of like personality that helps make this movie as dark and disturbing and like bleak as it is. And the reason that this one makes it in my top 3 is if I walk out of a movie theater from a horror film specifically just feeling bad and empty, I think it kind of did its job. Because that movie, like, I just, yeah. I was fucked up by that movie. And particularly, like, halfway through, my reaction to what had happened was more or less the same as the character on screen. And if you've seen it, you know what I'm talking about. If you haven't, you will know what I'm talking about. It's a slow burn, takes a while to get to where it's going. I don't think that's a bad thing. I loved the pacing of that movie. I don't think it could have been done any better. And when you get to the... Anyway, it's a slow burn, it takes a while to get to where it's going. I really loved the pacing. I think it was essential for the way that that movie plays out. And a lot of the most disturbing parts come from the interactions between the characters. But when it gets to the ending and goes where it does, holy shit. It was terrifying. The ending is very much what you're waiting for in that movie and takes you by complete surprise, and I loved everything about it. Number 3 pick. See it, buy it, rent it, do whatever you need to, but see Hereditary, because you should.
My number 2 was Strangers Pray at Night. And this one's kind of like what he said about Purge. Because I know a lot of people actually weren't too thrilled about the second one. And I know, actually most people that I've heard like the first one. But it's kind of like one of those movies where you can roll your eyes at me. Kind of like what you said. But Strangers is one of my favorite horror franchises of all time. The first time I seen it, I wasn't with you, but I remember being in the theater and I was like, oh my god, I don't know why, it really shook me. I wasn't a big fan of the ending like he said, but I loved the soundtrack, it was incredible, I loved the concept, everything about it. Strangers is really good about doing things in the background that they don't make very obvious. And I like when horror movies kind of don't give away everything and kind of let their audience figure it out. Make their audience, they think of their audience as a little more intelligent as to figure things out and piece together things on their own. And it's just one of my favorite horror franchises. I thought it was incredible. Loved the kills, loved the actors. Had me on the edge of my seat the whole time. It is a staple for me. We have yet to buy it, but we're gonna buy it as soon as we get a good price on it. So yeah, that was my number 2.
Good pick. My number 2 has already been mentioned, and that is Revenge. Revenge is sick. I am a huge fan of revenge films of all sorts. One of my other favorite genres of movies is Yakuza films. So pretty much all of those are revenge films at the end of the day. Shudder has a ton of great ones on there, so again, shout out to Shudder for being sick as fuck. But anyway, with Revenge, it takes like the I Spit on Your Grave idea of rape revenge and just like goes even further with it. Maybe not in terms of like the torture and like graphicness of I Spit on Your Grave, but in terms of saying, let's give this woman like all the power in the world to do what she needs to. So it's not extremely realistic, and I don't mind that. A lot of people that talk shit on it are like saying how some of the things that happen just could never happen, and that is like unrealistic and stuff. And that's the point. Like, they're not making any bones about it. Like, this movie is dripping in style. The lighting, the camera work, like everything about it is stylistic. So it's not supposed to be this super realistic tale. It's fucking a woman being as badass as possible and killing these three fuckers that you don't like. It's sick. I love it. The ending is amazing, and I cannot get over it. It will forever be one of my favorite scenes ever. And again, the way that ending is shot is unlike anything else and brilliant. So I cannot say enough good things about this movie. It is awesome, great, wonderful, incredible, phenomenal. That's all I gotta say. Go see Revenge. End of that. Number 2.
So my number 1 of the year was Hereditary. Again, my favorite films. It was directed by A24, right? Or
well, I mean, they're the producers.
Producer, excuse me, yeah. And they're one of my favorites. But also because they produced The Witch, right?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, so they produced The Witch, which is one of my favorite horror films of all time. Love possession, satanic, culty horror. It's like my favorite across the board. Slow burn, my favorite across the board. And when this trailer came out, it was one of those things where me and Zach were like, it's a horror movie, we're gonna go see it. It wasn't something that I was like super pumped about or super excited. I was just kind of interested. We thought it would be good. And then like half an hour into the movie, we were shook. I was shook.
Probably like 45 minutes, but yeah, who's counting?
I was shook, and this movie, like, by the end of it in the theater, I just had like a really, really big wave of anxiety over my body, and that like never happens. It is incredible, and I think that has to do with the fact that it is, again, my favorite type of horror film. I just love it. We never buy DVDs when they first come out, like we already mentioned, and I literally bought that the second it came out. We were walking through Target, and I was like, we're buying this.
Yeah.
It's incredible. Yeah, it wasn't really hyped up until it came out, and like people saw it, and they were like, whoa, like this movie, and then it got a lot of hype. But it was incredible. Kind of pisses me off because there's some people that said they didn't like it or they didn't think it was scary, and like we're not going to get into it because it was one of the best horror films.
They're wrong.
A lot of people compared it to this generation's Exorcist, and I couldn't agree more. I think it was fantastic. Had me on the edge of my seat. Again, like he said, all the actors were amazing. And again, a thing that I appreciated most about that film was the trailer. The trailer was so, like, not to give too much away, if you don't want to hear about it, maybe fast forward 2 minutes. The trailer was so misleading, and so, like, the trailer had me think one thing the movie was going to be about, and it was completely different. And that was something that, like, I appreciated so much about that film. It was incredible. So that had to be my number 1. Apostle and Hereditary were, like, the first 2 things I wrote down on my list, and without a doubt, without a shadow of doubt, Hereditary, one of my favorites of all time, and my top pick for 2018.
And a very good pick it is. Alright. My number 1. My number 1 is Mandy. And Mandy is the... well, I can't say that.
Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you. Hereditary is not streaming on anything currently. You have to buy it or rent it. Sorry.
Yeah.
And Mandy is on Shudder.
Yes. So... Mandy is my number 1 movie for 2018, and if this was a 2018 movies, like everything that came out, Mandy would still be number 1 on my list. When I found out that the guy that directed Beyond the Black Rainbow, his name is Panos Cosmatos. When I found out he was coming out with another movie that starred Nicolas Cage, that was like 2 hours and some odd minutes long, and that was going to be this crazy visual experience set in like a horror style universe, I was sold. I saw the trailer, I was sold. But I have to say that this movie did so much more than what they put out there and can be explained in so many different ways. But at the end of the day, what you need to know about Mandy is it's a revenge film that has a super slow start for like the first hour probably, and then the next hour is just pure insanity. And throughout the whole thing, it's an acid trip. The color usage and the effects on the camera and everything that happens during this movie is just so creative and completely unique to Panos' style. If you've seen Beyond the Black Rainbow, it's a very red and black driven movie with extreme like lighting usage that like helps create its visual style, but it's also very minimalistic. This movie is very opposite of that in terms of being minimalistic. But it's basically like the way that people describe it is it's metal culture versus hippie culture. And to some extent that's the case. Like that's the underlying like theme. But at the end of the day, it's a revenge story, just like you would anticipate from seeing the trailer. The thing is that he brings in so many elements that are unexpected. He just gets super creative. There are no limits in his universe, and he wanted to create a movie that is just a visual feast. This is a movie that, again, I intentionally watched super high because I knew it would add to the experience, and it really did. There's a certain really long shot that just like blew my mind in that state, and I would love to talk more about it, but I just don't want to ruin anything. And I cannot say enough good things about this movie. It's not going to be for everyone, and I understand that, but it was something unlike anything I've ever seen, and that's what I get the most out of when I see a movie. And Nicolas Cage's performance in this is so fucking good. Like, he knew what he was doing when he was directing him, and it really shows. I cannot say enough good things about this movie. I'm missing a bunch of things that I want to say, but see the movie. It's on Shudder streaming. I'm so happy about that, and I just bought it on Amazon as well. So that's my number one pick for 2018, Mandy, and thank you, Panos, for putting out yet again another incredible film.
So we have some honorable mentions as well. We're not going to really talk about them because he's talked about some and I've already talked about some. But I'm just going to tell you the names of them, and then we're going to tell you where you can watch them. So these are all things that we wanted to put on our list, but we wanted to stick to a top 10, but they're all incredible. So my honorable mentions are Malevolent, streaming on Netflix, Terrified, streaming on Shudder, Annihilation on Amazon Prime, First Purge, which isn't streaming yet, but again, you can buy it or rent it, Mandy, streaming on Shudder, and The Endless on Netflix. So
yeah.
What are yours?
So mine are Halloween, that again is going to be rental or
Just came out, so
DVD or whatever. Terrified, May the Devil Take You, and The Ritual. Those last three specifically, I had a really hard time not putting on my list. Like, it kind of hurts my soul not to. But at the
again, hence the name Terrified. But yeah, so watch it if you have Shudder. If not, I would just stream it or try to rent it, because it was ranked one of the top horror films of 2018.
One of the scariest, yeah.
One of the scariest.
And I would agree with that. It was like, each segment is terrifying. Like, they're all very well done. It's just like the story's hard to follow, and I think that's most people's biggest issue with it. But if that's the only thing that I can say negative about it, I think it's really good. And the horror elements of it are just top notch. So definitely see that one on Shudder. But yeah, other than that, that's our lists.
So yeah, so we are gonna do a lot more horror films on this, or a lot more horror films.
Yeah, we're gonna make horror films now.
So we're gonna be uploading a lot more horror content on this channel. But yeah, it's like my favorite thing in this whole world to talk about. So we decided, I filmed this video originally for just me and my list, but I figured I would have Zach on here too because he has some different mentions and different takes on the films. So it was a lot of fun. So you guys know the drill. If you like the video, like button down below, subscribe to my channel to see more. And so yeah, till next time, we will see you then. Bye.
Well, you can say it, but you got to have some meat behind it, you know. I said, if I ever see any devil, I'll just cast him out. That's where it's gonna be. Be.